welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and we are welcoming back one of our absolutely favorite guests of all time. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks. I'm Brenda Janowitz. I'm a novelist, and I'm also the books correspondent for Pop Sugar. And I'm now putting favorite podcast guest on my bio because I'm hugely flattered. Thank you.
We're flattered as well. So, what would you like to tell us about some books coming out in the winter for our winter reads?
Absolutely. So my Pop Sugar list just came out for winter, and I'm so excited about it, especially since this year there are so many books that people are talking about, which is always an exciting thing when people can't stop talking about books. So one of the first books that people cannot stop talking about is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. And this book is a really meaty look at race and childcare issues. It's basically a babysitter she's black, she takes her charge out on a Saturday night, an emergency situation. So she's dressed for Saturday night in her cute little skirt and her high heels, but she has to grab the girl that she babysits for, who's white, and they go to a local market. While there, I guess well-meaning patrons decide, well, obviously this young girl has stolen this white child, and they detain her at the store and don't let her go.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you could really imagine happening, and Kylie Reid herself has been a babysitter in the past, so it sort of lends that realism to it.
Of course, yeah, and absolutely, that does seem 100%. Unfortunately, it seems 100% realistic.
Yeah, just the world we live in. So it's just a really smart, thoughtful take on race and women, especially young women of color, how they're seen in the world. And it's a great read. I mean, you could read it just for plot because so many interesting things happen, but it's a great book club pick because there's so much to think about and so much to sort of dig into, which is fantastic. Another great one, speaking of things to think about, is Followers by Megan Angelo. That one really made me think because that one is about social media and sort of the way we interact with it. It takes place, it's dual timelines, which usually means I'm going to say present day and then, something in the past. But this one is present day and then the future.
Oh, that's very different.
Very different. And in the future, there's a town called Constellation, and that's where all these reality stars live, and they're filmed 24/7.
So almost like the Truman Show, but they're fully aware of what's going on.
Exactly.
Oh, because I have to say, like, the Truman Show came up in conversation the other day.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. I think like one of the things that was mentioned was just how heartbreaking it was that he didn't realize he didn't want any of this fame, but that's not the case anymore. So that sounds like a really interesting book.
That's true. It is interesting. It's a fascinating read, but it's also highly entertaining, and it says something really meaningful about social media and our relationship to it. So that's one definite must-read. And then speaking of crazy buzz and crazy situations that no parents would want to be, another of the buzziest books of the season is Saint X by Alexis Shatkin. I'm sure I've just butchered her name. Apologies if I have. But this is basically, this book is every parent's nightmare because a family goes on a tropical vacation and their older daughter disappears and is found dead days later. It's basically every parent's nightmare. But this book is so beautifully written that it was like completely unputdownable. So you see the perspective of the younger sibling, you see the perspective of the two men who were accused of the murder and just sort of how it affects their lives and sprouts outward. And even though that's like a terrifying worst case scenario, the scariest thing any parent can imagine, there's something so fascinating about this book because it's so deep and it does dig so deep into each character, and this on a sentence level, it's so beautifully written. So that's why that one is one of the most anticipated books of the season. But also anticipated and not quite as dark is, as we discussed, Una Out of Order.
Which is amazing. I read an ARC of it, and it was great.
Yeah, this book, wow. It's hard to describe because I feel like you're always giving it short shrift, but very simply stated, it's about a woman who goes to bed on the eve of her birthday and wakes up not a year older, but in a completely different time period of her life. So she goes to sleep 18, turning 19. She wakes up, I think she's 51 in the first time jump.
Yeah.
And she discovers that she hasn't just missed part of her life. She's living her life completely out of order. And every year at her birthday, she will wake up at a different age.
It was really it was really good.
This book, yeah, it's just fascinating. It's a fascinating read. And again, I feel like I'm giving it short shrift when I describe it, but it covers so many different things. I think in my write-up I said the nature of time.
Relationships,
who we are, how we see ourselves, aging, right?
I would say that's a very good point. Because she is a younger person in an older person's body at one point, and then she kind of catches back up, but then but it's like with everything she learns, there's a wisdom to it that she probably wouldn't have gotten if she wasn't living her life out of order.
Right. That's absolutely true. That sort of perspective that she gets. And there's a lot of surprises and I don't want to ruin any of them, but this book, I will say I loved the music aspect.
I was going to bring that. I was going to bring that up, and that was one of the books. I think we ran into you, and you gave me the quick premise, and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I think I saw, I glanced at an ARC of it that someone got from like one of the publishing festivals. And I couldn't put it down. I just, you sold it and you're selling it now, hopefully to our listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really fell in love with that book. And I had something in my Instagram stories where I talked about having a book hangover. Have you ever had this happen to you where you finish a book?
My Real Children by Joel Walton. I still have a book hangover from that one. Have you read that one?
No.
Oh, well, that completely.
But now I'm going
yes, that was an older book, but that one, every person I've given it to feels that way. But yes, this one also was a book hangover.
Yeah, when I finished the book, it's hard because I'm reading books before they come out, and I'm trying to compile this list of sort of my favorites and the best and the ones that you should read. But after I read this book, I was so floored. I couldn't pick anything else up, and it seemed like every book I picked up I just couldn't get into because I was just still under the spell of Una Out of Order. And so what I did was I picked up an old John Green book that I knew that I had loved before and that I would love again. It was Looking for Alaska, and they had just created the Hulu show, and so I thought to myself, okay, great, I'll reread this, I'll watch the show, and it'll sort of get me out of my funk. And that did, in fact, get me out of my book hangover funk. But other things that some of my readers suggested, they said, sometimes when I read a book like that, I just put books down and I don't read for a day or two. Have you ever done that?
I've tried, but with the nature of my job, I can't really do that. I sort of have, it's difficult. Like, if any listener has a book hangover cure that they went, obviously Brenda has been recommended a few, but anything else, let us know because it's tough. It's tough.
I myself can't do the put books down thing because then I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you do in your free time? You don't want me to play on my phone. That would be dangerous.
Right.
Then I'm in Followers by Megan and Angelo land where weird things would happen. So I need my books.
Yes.
But sometimes it can be tough. And, that's part of the thing when I'm compiling the list, I try to have lots of different genres, different types of authors, because I think it's good. Sometimes when you read the same type of book back to back, it's hard to judge them against each other. Whereas if you read something, like Una Out of Order, maybe then you do historical fiction next, or you do one of these like completely crazy ones like Followers. That's like a crazy concept. Or, I forgot to mention The Wives by Taryn Fisher, about a woman who is the Thursday wife And there's lots of other wives that her husband's married to. So something just completely different, like a domestic fiction like that, can sort of get you out of that funk maybe because it's a different genre.
Yes, that's a good point.
So I think it's important to read really widely.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I also have on my list The Girl in White Gloves by Carrie Marr. And it's about Grace Kelly, the life and times of Grace Kelly, who, you know, the original American princess. We're all so fascinated by her. And, you know, I'm obviously obsessed with her because I wrote a book called The Grace Kelly
Yes, you
Dress.
did. And that's coming out in March, correct?
Yeah, The Grace Kelly Dress comes out March 3rd. I'm really excited about it. And I'm actually trying to set up some dates with Carrie. So for all those people who need their Grace Kelly fix, you'll have the 1-2 punch of the biographical fiction of The Girl in White Gloves, where you learn about Grace Kelly and her life. And then you've got The Grace Kelly Dress, which is a completely different take. It's about an heirloom dress passed down to 3 generations, but that dress is inspired by Grace Kelly's iconic gown.
And it is iconic. That's, you know, when you talk about something that never goes out of style, I don't think that there's a time period where you couldn't wear something like that. And it's like, it's timeless and it's classy.
Yeah, I so agree. You know, whenever I think about wedding dress, I just think of Grace Kelly's wedding dress. For me, there's no other. And I remember when I was first pitching this book to my agent and talking about the idea, we were talking about what the dress would look like. And I had described Grace Kelly's wedding gown, and she was like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you not know what I'm describing? This is Grace Kelly's dress. And she was like, oh, yeah, it is. So I decided to go all in and just call it the Grace Kelly dress because that's what it was.
And it's an awesome title.
Thank you. So I'm really excited about the book. Really excited about all things Grace Kelly sort of being back in the zeitgeist again. There was also Meet Me in Monaco by Heather Webb and Hazel Gaynor last summer. So lots of Grace Kelly stuff sort of happening.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, and like you said, she's fascinating and people are always interested.
I agree. And in November, it was what would have been her 90th birthday.
Oh, wow. She was, she was very young when she passed. And
she was so young. Yeah. And now it's so fascinating, her children and her children's children, just sort of following that legacy and seeing their lives and how we're still fascinated by it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me as a writer.
So what else have you been up to?
Well, my big thing is, as I'm preparing to get in the publicity bubble of the Grace Kelly dress, one of the things I always do is publish essays to just sort of like get my stuff out there again, remind people I exist, you know. And there's one thing that was sort of my white whale that I've been trying to get for years and years and years, which is the New York Times Modern Love column. And I got it.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I had a column published in November called He's Never Going to Put Away That Shirt. You can imagine what this is about. And it's just one of those funny stories. You know, my husband had left a shirt out one day. And for whatever reason, being the crazy writer that I am, I guess, I just decided I wasn't going to put it away. I was sick of picking up after my 2 sons and my husband all the time. And in the essay, I acknowledge my husband does a lot in the house, and my kids do a lot too, quite frankly, but it's never enough. And I work from home, so I'm sort of the default person who sort of picks up after everybody and puts everything back together. But when it came to the shirt, there was just something about it, and I refused to put it away. Now, the funny thing was, you know, for the longest time, I was using this story as sort of an example with friends, and I'd go out for lunch, and people would say, how's your husband? How are your kids? How's the shirt? And it sat out for a very long time. When I first set out to do this, when I first said I'm not putting the shirt away, I figured it would be out there like 4 days, 5 days, a week max. And then Doug and I would have like a laugh about it, how I refused to put it away, and I counted how long it lasted. But it went on for months. And it was seemingly like he couldn't see the shirt anymore. And as it stayed there longer and longer, it became like a thing. Like I couldn't possibly put it away at that point because I'd sort of dug my heels in and I couldn't put it away. So it just became a story I told friends. You know, I'd be out for lunch. People would complain about their husband. I'd say, well, let me tell you about this shirt. And then, someone would just have a baby and they would talk about how their life had changed and moving out to the burbs, their life was different. And I would say, well, let me tell you about the shirt. And so I was having coffee with the novelist Laura Dave, who is a wonderful friend, but also an even more wonderful writer. She wrote 800 Grapes, Hello Sunshine. Anyway, I adore hanging out with her, and she's married with a small child, and we were just talking about the writing life and how, you're trying to be a mom full time, but you're trying to be a writer full time, and she was just talking about the stress of sort of getting back to work after baby and what it's like having small children. And I said to Laura, well, let me tell you about the shirt. So I told her the whole story, and she looked me dead in the eye, and she said, that's your modern love. And I said, no, it's not. I can't write something about Doug's shirt. That's ridiculous. She said, no, that's your modern love. You've got to write it up. So, I always take Laura's advice, be it about my writing or my writing career. So I said, okay, let me write this up as a modern love. And I did, and it came out in November. It was really exciting.
Congratulations. That's really cool.
Thanks.
That column, I've caught a few of them, and they're very interesting. And I feel like I'm the shirt person in the relationship in my own house. That's the embarrassing thing.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because I got a lot of emails from readers, and they said, oh, I'm the Brenda, or they said, oh, I'm the Doug.
Yeah. I think I'm the Doug, and part of it comes from... the fact that I'm kind of lazy. And part of it is also because, we work full time and we have stuff going on, and we also have two small kids, and our shirt is an entire laundry basket. And the question is, when we're going to put it away, when we're going to fold it. And I kind of set the cue. My husband will be like, we have to do this. And I'll be like, okay, but I just want to sit down and watch this episode of The Mandalorian, or I have to finish this chapter. And then suddenly it's 11 o'clock at night, and we're never going to fold that laundry.
I know. It's so true. You know what? It's funny because I did an event with Eve Rodsky, who wrote Fair Play, which is a book about the home balance, the work-life balance, and who does what within the home. And, she talks a lot about this, about, her system is dealing the deck of the many household chores, how you sort of make it so that you're not always resentful of each other. But one of the things she talks about is figuring out which chores are important to you. And after reading the book, I realized laundry was something that was really important to me, because I wanted it done in a very specific way. I care if stains remain after the dryer, I will wash it again. Whereas my husband's like, it's clean, it's fine. So I take over laundry. That's something I care about. And when it comes to dishes, my husband gets so annoyed if there's dishes in the sink, because he once had a roommate who left dishes in the sink and just sort of left them for days and days and days.
I had that.
So for Doug, it bothers him. Whereas I'm like, no, I know. I'll do them at some point. It doesn't bother me to have dishes in the sink. So it's an interesting interplay with that. What do you care about? What actually bothers you? And in the case of the shirt, Doug just didn't see it, because I will now tell you, as a lot of people who've been in Modern Love told me to do, I got a print made up of the essay, because it's a very big deal for me. And I said to one of my girlfriends, she said, oh, you should hang it in the exact spot where the shirt was. So I was like, that's hilarious. So I'm going to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I told my husband, I said, honey, we're going to hang this shirt exactly where you left it for 8 months. And he was like, great. And he pointed to the wrong wall. I was like, honey, that's not where the shirt was.
Modern Love follow-up.
Yeah.
He doesn't even remember where the shirt was.
He has no idea where the shirt was. So, yeah, that was my favorite part.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I had to tell him, no, honey, it was actually here. And then we had a great laugh about it. We just laughed hysterically over that one.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But, certain things are important to different people. And
I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Brenda, thanks again for coming back. We always love having you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
And we can't wait to dig in and start reading some of these books.
Awesome. The full list is on Pop Sugar. Or you could just go to my profile page on Pop Sugar, and it's easier to find from there. It's also all over my website and my Instagram. I'm very easily findable, but the full list is on popsugar.com.
Terrific. Thanks again. And once again, this is Jessica with
Brenda Janowitz.
And we're going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.